In my last video, we finished the Pinsetter, but let's be honest, it wasn't actually finished. There's still a few more things we need to do before that's actually done. To start off, let's motorize the two things we did not do. We need to add a motor onto here. That will line up with those treads. I decided we're going to put the motor on this side, as I have a good amount of clear space to work on there, not so much over here. Attaching a cable to the EV3 and the motor lets us see that when we power it, it doesn't work. After a whole lot of testing, we finally got it to work. So now, when we use this, it's able to move it back and forth. That is due to this mechanism. There's a spring that pushes that up, and that force goes directly onto the gear, onto the tracks. Next, we gotta motorize this going up and down. That's gonna be a pretty big challenge, as this thing weighs a whole lot. That was a lot of building, but finally we have all the supports and gears to where it's geared down so it's easy enough for this motor to spin. So if we use the EV3, we can now power that motor. So if we spin it this way, it should raise it up. It's quite slow because of the gearing. Here we have an 8-tooth gear with a 24-tooth gear and an 8-tooth gear with a 48-tooth gear. So that significantly slows it down. Here you can see that in action. But slowing that down takes some of the force off that motor, making it just have to spin more times to move it instead of doing one time to move it a lot. That's a bunch more force. Up next, we need to get the ball return working. The ball will come out of there and needs to be able to travel all the way through and up to the person. So right now the ball goes in there and falls in there. So we take something like this, that will create a ramp. So if we hook that up there and attach it down here, it'll create a ramp. So now if we take the ball, drop it there, it'll go out. So now if we add a track down there, it'll continue its momentum. So now, if we take the ball and roll it up the ramp, which you can't really see, but it goes up the ramp, comes back down, passes on these two rails. Next on the list, we need to make the pin sweep and the lane. I'm not quite sure which one would be better to do first, so let's try the lane and then the pin sweep. That way we at least know where it lines up. While we're doing the lane, we'll also do the gutters and a few other things. With this guide in, now we can put the gutters in. Instead of using tiles or something, I'm just using panels, and if we stack them all together, we can lay them down and it'll make a smooth gutter for the ball. With the gutter in on this side, now we can see that the ball can roll. These pieces will then hold the lane. The lane is going to be made out of a whole lot of these. So I started building, and things are not lining up at all. So I realized that going across here is an odd number of studs, which shouldn't be right if this is a 4-stud pin in the center. And then I dropped the pin down into the center, which I probably should have done at the start instead of just counting. And it lands on these 2 studs. And it means that this is like 2 studs too far, so we actually have to make the lane unfortunately more narrow. So let's redo a whole lot of stuff. And we're done. So unfortunately, that made the lane quite a bit smaller. But now the pins are centered. So we got the lane done. So now if we slide that into here, it will be able to lock in. That is due to just a few pieces on here, like that one, and one on the back. Those tabs go into inserts, like the one way down there. That way the lane can't move around much. So now, if there's pins on there, and then we take the ball, we're able to bowl. So now we need to do the pin sweep. And that's going to be very difficult because we need to be able to sweep from about here all the way back there. That's about 48 studs. And most of the pin sweeps and stuff like that on YouTube are only about 24 or 16 or 12 studs. So we're going to have to do a lot of work on that to get it to be able to sweep 48 studs. And my prediction was right. This took a whole lot of trial and error. The next little while of this video is just this thing not going well, but eventually we finally got it. These are just a few ideas I had which did not work. One of the many issues with the pin sweep is that we need to have the burr that rotates be mounted in the center of what we need cleared. So if we have a burr in the center of this, it needs to be able to be this long and sweep all the way around. But height-wise and space-wise, as you can see, we don't really have that. So I'm gonna do a whole lot of testing and see what we can do. So I thought about this a whole lot, and I think I may have figured it out. So we need a beam to go forwards and backwards. And up here, we have gear racks and a gear to slide something forwards and backwards. If we do that down here, take some sort of carriage system to move this arm forwards and backwards, but only connect it here because we have all this space to use. We got about one stud of space over here though. So make it motorized here, have a guide there, and then once it's over here, it just needs to go up. So if we have this connected to an arm here, which has a little joint and a pivot arm up, that way when it comes forward, it would hit that arm and continue and pivot up. But that would be more like back here, so that way it'd swing down and then slide back. We just need to add an arm underneath so that way it can't go forwards while it's sliding back. So let's begin. If you couldn't tell from the enthusiasm in my voice there, that took several days to figure out and a whole lot of trial and error. But upon working this out for another couple days, we eventually got it, and here's a lot of fails. But every time this thing didn't work, we gained a little bit of progress and knowledge on how to eventually get it to its final stage. So, right now, we have a gear track here, a rail there, and tiles there. If we take this, which is just a motor, through gears, spinning that gear, and then you slide it into here. Now, when this spins, this will go forwards and back. Now, we need to turn that side-to-side motion into the pin sweeping, lifting up and down, and side to side. It's now several days later from the last clip, and I've started thinking and doing some progress here. So, here we can see we have that arm, and it's a little longer, and now I need to build up this wall, but not with the panels which have these gaps. We need it to be flush so that way it can slide across. So right now, what we have is the ability to have this move forwards and backwards with the motor. And once it reaches here, we can put a stopper here that when it continues to go forwards, it would push there and lift up the arm. So I finished the mechanism over here that allows it to go back and then forwards and flip up. The current issue is that this length only goes down to about here, and we need it to get roughly here, but it really only needs to be about to there. So if we push this here, and then let's hold that there, that sticks out way too far. So instead, if we put this on a joint, so if I run an axle through here, it would just drape down. And then when it goes down, we could have a stopper that only allows it to go to there by having some sort of piece that sticks here. That way, once it swoops down, it would continue pushing. So let's try and build that. And we're done with the mechanism part. So now when this slides backwards, or first forwards, it's all the way up. And that level is enough to still see the pins clearly. And when it pushes forwards, that'll drop down and get into a locked position. And the height of that yellow bar is lower than a pin, so a pin can't pass through it. It'll have to push the pin. And it's able to lock itself forward, so you can't really push this until it's way out here and it lifts itself up. So it'll be able to push the pin or the ball all the way back, and then once it brings itself forwards, it'll lift up. Now that we got the pin sweeper basically working and the space needed for it, I wanted to build up the rest of that layer. That way, that's just not daunting on me to do later. And now we have most of it built. I'm unsure what to do here, if I want to put a section there, or if I want to just platform that up, build a wall here, or I'm thinking about putting a scoreboard here, or a title or something up here. Next up is going to be this section here. I guess we're going a little out of order today. So I'm thinking that we can have the wall push that like that, but this part here is going to have to either be open, or we could put some sort of paper sticker or something over it to where you wouldn't see it, but we'll do that in the future once this thing's about done. I had to redo this wall multiple times because the way the pin sweep swung out, it needed that gap and there was too much friction and things just weren't really lining up the whole time, and they still really weren't. Now with that wall and everything in, we can see it in action. I've now hooked up the EV3 to that motor so it can move. Let's replace that gear with an actual gear because now we have a motor on it, so I don't need to be able to manually push it around. There's a few issues with it getting stuck right now, but we should be able to work this all out. Like here, that tire is supposed to still be up there, like that. Next up was the pin sweep itself. This one was way too heavy, so then I just used a simple Technics axle rod, but that was a little too weak, so I added another one later and some plates and stuff like that. And then I also need a guide rail on the other side here. That way, it knows where to go and can't really get pushed around too much. With the guide rail in and everything seeming to be working, it was time to test it. And it didn't work. At this point, I really just wanted to quit and I wasn't sure what to do. I've now spent several days on this pin sweep and I can't get it to work. As you can see here, it is very much so not working, but I think I finally may have a solution to get this thing finally working. That solution was to use these curved Lego tubes as guide rails. On the left side, it just guides and kind of keeps it in place, and on the right side, it guides and keeps it in place while also lifting it up. So now, if we use this controller, we can move it down and sweep and then back up. Right now, this railing over here isn't installed, so I just have to fit it into the railing. Then it can slide back, and then forwards, and then it'll go up. So now let's just finish out this side, and then the pin sweep will be done. One of the challenges I didn't quite mention yet was keeping that thing level, as it's only held up and motorized on that left side. Keeping it at the same level on the right was quite difficult, and that's why there's a big chunk of pieces on the left side of the actual sweep that kind of holds it up and props it up, and then the tubes on the right side match the ones on the left to keep it at the same angle roughly. Okay, so I think it's finally done. Now let's give it an actual test. Let's just check it through a few pins on here, and let's see if it can sweep them up. Seems to have gotten caught here. Let's try that again. Still getting caught. Seems like we're also going to need to put a little tab there. That way it pushes those pins all the way. Or at least like where the gutters are. But it's able to go up all the way, and it's fairly level. So it obviously still is not working. But I added the dark gray tabs here and on the right side as well. That way it'll push the pins out of the gutter, and I did a few modifications on the right side, and it finally works. There we go. Here we can see it can push a pin or the ball, whatever it needs to. Maybe not the ball. Like how we sort the ball out from the pins, instead of doing that where it squashes the ball into the track, we want it to instead lift the ball up so that way there's less friction. These pins are placed to where it goes on the bottom half of the ball. As you can see, the little red piece that sticks out is on the lower half. So if we take the ball and place it there, now it should be able to push the ball. It's now been over a month since I started working on this since the last episode. And let's finish this episode up. So I'm thinking, now that we have this about done, maybe it could be a little more level. We need to just finish this top part. But I don't want to make it just a boring box. I say we attempt to put a score counter here with all 3 EV3 bricks. I chained up 3 EV3 bricks with a button in between each one. That way I have 11 buttons in a row, 10 of those could be used for pins, and then I'll have an extra button I can do whatever with, but that way I can select a single pin if I ever need to. This control panel is going to go on the front in the section we just talked about. And with that in place, now we just have to build up the rest of the walls. As I finish this episode by building the last wall, I wanted to say thank you guys for showing all the support on this series so far. If you want to show your support, be sure to hit that subscribe button as it is always free. It's more just like a follow button, and it shows that you guys enjoy the videos. In my next episode, we'll do things like the rest of the lane, the ball return, and maybe even start programming and finishing up the whole machine. So be sure to look out for that video.